I'll just start by way of a very brief introduction. My name is Paul, and I'm very fortunate and honored to have the opportunity to guide this learning community conversation on the topic of de-escalation. This training, I think, was developed, I would say 9 or even possibly 10 years ago at the request of a specific organization because they wanted to train their entire staff, not just their clinical staff. They wanted to train their entire staff about de-escalation. So certainly it's been updated and changed through that 10 years, but ultimately it is really a training that is beneficial for anyone who's working in the frame of social services. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I'm currently a research project director at the New York State Psychiatric Institute. I'm also a senior staff trainer and curriculum writer for the Northeast and Caribbean Addiction Technology Transfer Center. By training, I had the great opportunity to go to Hunter College School of Social Work in New York City, and I am a social worker by training, and my area of focus was group development and group facilitation. I also had the great opportunity, although an intense opportunity, but the great opportunity to start my social service career in 1991, providing direct care and services to people living with HIV and AIDS. And I did that until about 2003, where I made the intentional transition into workforce development and training and curriculum development. Welcome back, Elsie. You're listed as Beatrice. I'm not sure which is you'll let me know what is the correct name to call you. And all day yesterday I was calling you Elsie.
Well, Elsie is my legal name, but I go by Beatrice, or B for short.
Okay, so what would you prefer me to call you?
You can call me B.
Excellent. Thank you, B. I appreciate that. Thanks for the clarification. So folks, we're going to go ahead and take care of just a couple of these logistical details. I will just remind you what I've asked you to consider, and I believe that a couple of our colleagues are possibly going to start us off in this conversation, but what I've asked you to consider, and something we'll begin this conversation with after we take care of the logistics, is what brought you to registering and participating in a learning community focused on de-escalation. So just keeping that in mind, you don't have to answer it in the chat. You don't have to do anything, but just think about that right now. So again, we are here to focus on the topic of de-escalation, and we are a learning community working together. So as a learning community, I'm going to ask us to consider, as one of our overarching guidelines, to using language as we talk to each other, as we engage in a dialogue. There are 38 of us in the learning community, that is welcoming, respectful, and inclusive of all 38 of us who are here. Also, because we are a learning community, what you may bring to the table around this topic, the information that I may share with you, may not necessarily reflect the official position of our funder, and that's okay, because our funder wants this learning community conversation, this opportunity for us to be together for a little less than 3 hours now, to be relevant to what you're actually doing and to support you and what you're doing in your work. Welcome, and I would be remiss if I didn't say welcome back to many familiar and inspiring faces that are in the learning community today. If you have not yet done so, this is the last time I'll say it. Please do type your full first and last name in the chat. And if you happen to be sharing your computer with anybody, please type their full first and last name in the chat. That's the way we can assure that you will get your full 3 hours of credit if, of course, you stay for the full 3 hours. As I said, I'm going to do my best to leave some time at the end. Usually it's around 2 or 3 minutes for you to complete the evaluation. It probably won't take longer than that. Sometimes I'm better at leaving that time at the end than others, but I will do my best. What I would ask, in additionally to the language that we use each other, if you can turn on your camera, if it works for your particular context or setting to be on camera, if it works for your learning style, because for some people it doesn't, and I honor and respect that. If you can turn on your camera, please be on camera for the entire 3 hours. If you need to step away, just send me a direct message and let me know you're stepping away. And just rejoin us when you come back, turn your camera back on and rejoin us. If you're not going to be on camera, and I think a couple of people have done this already in the chat, so I thank you already. But if you are not going to be on camera for whatever reason, just send me a direct message and let me know you're not going to be on camera. And again, I'm just glad you're here, and I respect whatever decision you make about whether it's good for you or not good for you to be on camera. I would ask, because I think there are 39 of us now, that you, until you have something that you want to comment on, add information, question, react to, if you wouldn't mind remaining muted. Now, if there is something you want to ask a question about, share information about, react to, do not hesitate at any time to unmute when I'm in the middle of talking. Feel free to interrupt me, unmute, and just say, hey, I'd like to add something here. What I would ask, though, is if B has the floor or anybody else in the learning community has the floor, please do not interrupt B or anybody else. Let's offer them the respect of listening to what they have to say and giving them the space. Now, I'm sensing that somebody is unmuted, and I just want to check, is there something you want to add or say or question at this point? Or is it just an accidental unmute? Okay. So if there is, don't hesitate to interrupt. And then the final guideline that I'm going to ask everybody to consider is to please make I statements. I feel this way. I have this information. These are my values. This is what I believe. So these are our guidelines. And before I take the slide down, excellent, folks. Thank you so much for your direct messages. I really appreciate those, and I'm glad you're here. Fantastic. So I'm going to take this, I'll advance, but then I'm going to take this down and we'll look at this goal and the learning objectives. But I just want to ask, can everybody agree to these guidelines as stated? You can wave, you can give a thumbs up, you can not. Thank you. Terrence always gives a double thumbs up. I love that. Thanks, Terrence. You can also type Y in the chat. And I don't mean WHY, I mean Y for equaling yes, to let me know that you're willing to abide by these guidelines. So thank you for that, folks. There are now 40 of us in the learning community. Wonderful. Love that. I'm going to go back to sharing my slides just briefly to just orient us to the goal. Now, the first sentence of this goal, I'm going to read it. I don't generally read slides, but I'm going to read this out for a reason, because I'd like us to come back to this at some point, perhaps after we ponder, we invite people to verbalize why they actually joined us today for this particular topic. And again, I'm going to read this directly from the slide. To normalize heightened affect feelings as part of the human interactions in the health services environment. I'll let you look at that for a minute yourselves. And again, I'd like us to come back to this at some point. So if you can, kind of put that psychological, or if it's visual for you, that visual pin in this idea, normalizing heightened affect within the social services environment. And then we're also, the goal is to really focus on ways of being and methods of communicating with people that sometimes can actually preemptively or responsively decrease conflict and promote collaboration. To that end, there are, and this is an ambitious agenda for 3 hours, because sometimes this course, when it's delivered in person, is actually a 6-hour course. But because we're doing it online, I've tailored it to 3 hours. That there are actions that can be taken that you can prepare to de-escalate. So hopefully we're going to get to cover that. We'll also talk about a model called the ABC model, which stands for affect, behavior, and cognition, and we'll get to that. And many of you may be familiar with this model already. So for you all, it will be a refresher, hopefully. And we are going to identify, which won't be any huge revelation for anybody in this learning community, I don't think. We are going to define some of the communication skills that actually support de-escalation. And then, and you can also put that psychological or visual pin in this final learning objective, identify and commit to 2 self-care actions. Pin, we will come back to it. So before we get to considering what is on here, I'm going to invite, I believe it was Chelsea, Ermelinda, and it was one other person. I don't know if it was you, Claudette, or if it was somebody else who initially answered in the chat when I put, oh, it may have been Dawn. It might have
Yes,
been.
it was Dawn. It's me.
Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. So I'm going to invite either the 3 of you or anybody else who, Chelsea's already raised her hand. Fantastic. Chelsea, you'll start us off. The question I'm posing and I'm inviting people to share is, what brought you to registering for a course about and showing up for a course about de-escalation? So, and again, it could be the 3 credits, that you'll go into the new year with. Fantastic. That's great. You'll get those if you stay. And if it's anything else. So Chelsea, we'll start off with you and then we'll go. Go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Well, first of all, I was excited to go to one of your trainings because I always learn a lot from you. And number 2 is that in a lot, as I mentioned in my comment, there are some times I lead a lot, I facilitate a lot of meetings, and I usually have about 30 to 40 people in my meetings. And sometimes peers can be either disruptive. It doesn't happen all the time, very rarely, but I a couple months ago I had a peer who was very, they were talking very strongly about self-harm, and one of the challenges about leading groups is that you want to address everybody in the room, but also make sure that the person who is, very thinking very strongly of self-harm,
Yeah.
you address it with them as well. And you said like normalize that people can have very strong feelings. But so I just wanted to, based on the feedback that I did get, I handled the situation very, very well. And I addressed the whole room as well as that one person. But if I came so I could see if there's anything else that I could do to, if that situation or some similar situation comes up, I can better handle it or, learn something. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Chelsea. Thank you. Ermelinda, Dawn, anybody else? What brought you to register for this learning community conversation about de-escalation?
Hi, hello everyone. This is Dawn.
Hey.
And the topic of de-escalation is one that's an important skill to have even beyond your profession, beyond being a social worker, because
True.
there's a lot of conflict
Yeah.
that is inwardly happening in people. So it's important to recognize when situations are going in a direction that would create an explosion and
Mhm.
finding ways to de-escalate that energy, not only in the room, but within myself. I want to make sure that I am grounded in a way that I'm not drawn into the energy. So,
Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, thank you so much, Dawn, and thank you for acknowledging. And I think it takes insight and courage to acknowledge this right off the bat, that we can become escalated as well. And that our escalation can create a significant negative impact on our efforts to de-escalate. Now, before we go to Ermelinda or to anybody else, I need to de-escalate any anxiety that you may be experiencing, because I told you that we were going to be together for 3 hours, and my colleague has informed me that we are only scheduled to be together for 2 hours. My sincere apologies, folks. Maybe it's greed on my part. I wanted to stay with you longer, but we're only scheduled for 2 hours. So we will be together for 2 hours, and I will do my best to cover everything in our agenda in that 2 hours. So please do not take a breath. We're going to be together for 2 hours, and we'll still have that break. And many thanks to my colleagues for very gently informing me that I misspoke there. So I'm very sorry about that. Ermelinda, anything you want to add? And then we'll go to Claudette. Go ahead.
Well, I was looking forward to this because I facilitate youth programs, and it's middle schoolers who are still kind of discovering themselves, their identities. And, right now we have a trend of I'm baddies. They want to be the baddies, and then they'll be friends one day, they'll be fighting the next day. And so, whatever tools I can pick up to help with that, especially because I'm nowhere near a teen anymore. So, so, I'm
All the
like,
teens in the room really are laughing at us, Ermelinda, but there it is.
yeah,
Go ahead.
there it is. So I'm trying to see, whatever tools I can get to help to keep de-escalation low,
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Claudette, please.
So good morning, everybody. Much like Ermelinda, I work in 2 middle schools, and I need all of the de-escalation tools that I can get. Every day it's something different. Every day it's something new.
Mm-hmm.
So I need all the help that I can get to help my students.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Claudette. And as you, Claudette, and Ermelinda were talking, it really made me think about something that Dawn said a moment ago, which was the idea of having skills where you're not being drawn into the drama of what may be going on. Because ultimately, being drawn into that drama, you're not going to necessarily be able to bring your best game to the table, so to speak. Yeah. Yes. Wanaki, go ahead. The floor is yours. And then we'll go to Terrence. Wanaki, are you there? I saw your hand briefly. Okay, we'll go to Terrence, and then Wanaki will join us if they want to. Go ahead, Terrence. The floor is yours, please.
All right,
And welcome
de-escalate.
back, by the way. Good to see
Thank
you
you.
again.
It's good to see you again. Seems like an everyday thing now.
I
Coffee talk.
know.
For me,
Great.
de-escalation is very useful. I'm a person who works as a peer recovery coach, so I have lived experience with the criminal justice, a lot of it with the criminal justice system.
Mhm.
And I work with a lot of people that are on probation, parole, drug courts, family courts. I'm on the 7th Judicial Criminal Justice Board for here in Colorado now. And when I do my all recovery meetings, or we go into the prisons and stuff and into the jails,
Mhm.
it's always helpful to have those tools. I mean, I have some, but my natural reaction is fight. It has been since I was in prison. And it's nice to be able to learn other things to be able to de-escalate a situation and be able to take that into your everyday life as well.
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
personal tools, not just for work. So I appreciate
Sure.
you, and thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And Terrence, you prompt me to want to acknowledge something about our learning community, because I am confident within the context of our learning community that most all of you have the skills necessary to do this. And it's about being able to intentionally bring those skills to the table in a way that will effectively intervene. And again, to your point, Terrence, and being able to add to what maybe you already have, if that's possible. So, or at least at the perhaps least remind you of what you have available. Wanaki, I saw you briefly for a moment there, and I see you're back on the screen. Was there something that you wanted to add, or was that an accidental hand raise? You'll let me know. Anybody else want to comment on what brought you?
Sorry, Mr. Paul, it's my service.
That's okay. Go right ahead. I hear you now. Go right ahead.
It's Wanaki is how you pronounce
Wanaki.
my name. How are you?
I'm
How's
very well,
everyone?
thank you.
I work well, our team, we work with the homeless population. So many of the unhoused individuals, they deal with trauma and mental health and substance issues. So the reason why I was interested in this training was to learn ways and techniques to help us, the team, myself, stay calm in circumstances when they may act out of violence or anger, to recognize like early warning signs.
Yeah.
And to be respectful and try to lower the situation or the anger or injury, to help these individuals, because they're navigating, and we are sometimes emotionally in intense situations. So I was hoping the de-escalation skills could help us stay safe and humane and respectful during those times.
Thank you so much, Wanaki. And again, you started by saying three very important things. You said many important things, but you underlined three very important contextual things to understand. Substance use, mental disorder, and there was one other one that you said too. Maybe physical illness as well. But that is what...
Yes.
Was that it? Okay. So it was physical illness as well. So that is what people come to the table with. Which leads me to that bullet that I was inviting that pin that I was asking people to put in, of the statement that participants, clients, consumers come to the social service environment in a state possibly of heightened affect. Any
Yes.
thoughts or any reactions to that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? I'm very curious as to what your take is on that. That participants walk through the, okay, so Wanaki agrees with that. Any other thoughts or reactions to that? And Sumara added something in the chat. I just want to, de-escalation is easy to explain, but difficult to practice because people have different temperaments and emotional reactions. Very true. And McKenna also agrees with that. So at least three of us in the learning community, because I agree with it too, but I'm very curious if other people have had that experience, that people walk in. Okay, so Ermelinda agrees as well. Why don't we do Claude's about to vote, I think, as well. Claude agrees. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Who is
I just
that?
wanted to, that's me, it's Ermelinda. I think
Go ahead,
that
Ermelinda, go ahead.
because it's also like it can't be obvious sometimes, like with youth, especially in Newburgh, we have a lot of economically disadvantaged families.
Yeah.
And some of these kids are hungry. Like by the time they get there in the afternoon, I'm an after school facilitator. So I try to bring snacks because a lot of these guys, they don't have food. The only meal they have is that lunch program. And food affects mood. If a kid is hungry and they're tired, they had a full day of school, it doesn't take much to set them off from another peer saying the wrong thing, whatever pressures may be going on that week. So yeah, they do come in a heightened state sometimes, and you have to take that also into account. Food disparity.
Yeah, and really very powerful. Food affects mood. I mean, and that may seem like such a simple, it makes perfect sense. And I'll tell you, it's something that I personally, I intellectually know that, but I haven't experienced being hungry for a long time, and how being hungry really does affect your mood. Yeah. Yeah. Julie says, good point. Any other thoughts, folks, about why in a de-escalation training I might want to underline or point out that people come into the social service environment many times in a heightened state or a heightened state of affect? Dorothy wrote, hungry, angry, halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Yes, absolutely, Dorothy. Because any of those can affect mood. Go ahead, Claudette. Go ahead.
What about a fear of judgment?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that affects your mood, right? You're on edge, you're anxious, or you might be angry because you've experienced judgment before, and you're ready to fight because you think it's going to happen again.
Right, absolutely.
And again, to protect yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Chelsea's adding sympathetic nervous system. Chelsea, if you're able to unmute, do you want to say anything about that?
Just really quickly. So
Please.
there's two different parts of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic is related to the amygdala in the brain, which is part of the limbic system, which affects anger and all that stuff. And the sympathetic nervous system is also related to the fight, flight, freeze, and fight, flight, fright, and freeze response that is very active in the heightened system. And there's a lot more to it that I could go into, but yeah.
Yeah. And Chelsea, if it's okay, can I add something to it, and will you kind of fact check me on this?
Yeah, sure.
Because clearly you know a lot about this. I think the point to consider, and Chelsea, thank you for bringing it to sort of a biological cellular level, because I think the thing to consider, folks, and this is part of the reason that I wanted to underline people may come with a heightened affect. To Chelsea's point, when someone is in a state of fight, flight, fawn, that's one of them as well, or freeze, they are in a different part of their brain. They don't have access in that moment because they are in that heightened state. They do not have access to the part of their brain that would allow them to relate to us and to possibly communicate with us. Bless you be. They are in a state of self-preservation and protection, and being very hyper aware of safety and danger. Chelsea, are you okay with that addition?
Just really quick. So I did mention the sympathetic nervous system is very related to the limbic system, which is all your emotions. And so when you try to help someone get to the parasympathetic nervous system, that means they're calmer, they can think. That's related to the prefrontal cortex, which is where you think, or you can, what you were just talking about. So yes, that is correct. I just want to mention that. Yeah.
Thank you. And the whole point, and Chelsea, thanks for putting it on the table so early. The whole point in de-escalation, folks, and for some people this may be helpful, for other people it may be like, okay, but the point is that when we are de-escalating somebody, we are helping them to move into possibly the part of their brain where they can then actually hear what we're saying, and they're actually then able to be in a conversation. Until they've moved into that part of their brain, that's not possible. And it's not they're failing. It's not because they're belligerent. It's because they're in a different part of their brain. And we can help them to make that transition. McKenna adds, in the child welfare system, I often see clients be more escalated when they have a history with the agency and a built-up mistrust. Yeah, McKenna, that's kind of what Claudette and I were kind of underlining, I think, before. Okay. Now, before we go back to the slides for just one moment, I want to go back to that final pin that I asked you to visually or mentally put in one of the goals. And does anybody remember what that actually, it was one of the learning objectives. Does anybody remember what that final pin was? We talked about what brought you here. We talked about the fact that people are in a heightened state of affect, which was in the goals. And then there was that learning objective that I asked you to put a pin in. Does anybody remember what that was? Dawn H is like, no, I don't remember. No problem, Dawn. Maybe Sumara does, or maybe somebody else does. Go ahead, Sumara.
I think we talk about our communication style, our vocal style, our posture, and a body language is more important. If you feel calm in yourself, so you're giving a impression, and this is effect we talk about in the last conversation, body and about the communication style. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
this
And
was
Sumara, you are absolutely right. And that is not the pin that I asked you to put in, but you are absolutely right in everything that you said. Ermelinda, would you be willing to unmute, as well as Yvonne, if you want to say anything, well, about what you've identified as the pin? And that's yeah, go ahead, Ermelinda.
Identify and committed to self-care, because while we're offering to de-escalate situations, we also have to maintain our mental health and our emotional health. So we have to learn when we need a break, when our sympathetic nervous system needs that break. Because let's face it, all of us are doing two jobs. Even in our one job, we're wearing many hats. So it because you're seeing, if you're facilitating 4 groups, that's 4 groups of 20 kids.
Yeah.
That's 80 personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
So
of which you are witness to.
yes. But you're privileged to do that.
Of course.
It's that honor to do that, to help them reach their points of understanding and growth.
Sure.
But that self-care, you can't give from an empty cup, as they say. So important.
Okay. So Yvonne, do you want to say anything about that in terms of self-care? Your take on why I'm bringing up self-care within the context of a de-escalation focused learning community?
Yeah.
Please, go ahead.
I used to work crisis services for a little over 5 years, and
Okay.
our schedule's a little like 24/5. What I noticed was, even though I had thought I had a very good self-care regime, I didn't recognize that sometimes certain situations might call for more self-care. You might be giving more than you think you are because you thought it was your day-to-day. But your day-to-day, if you're dealing with things that you're constantly either giving, you're constantly learning to de-escalate, that puts yourself in a place where you don't recognize it because you think it's your job. You think this is something that you just do. And so I think it's not only very important that you do take care of self-care, but also recognize that sometimes what you've been doing isn't working right now because you need more. And it's okay to say that. I think that that has been something that social workers might have a hard time explaining, because we are so used to giving, and asking for more sometimes feels like we're taking away from either our clients or from our jobs. But I think it's very important to continue to make sure that you're healthy and happy, because you can't teach those skills if you don't have them yourself. So I just think it's really important that you recognize with self-care that sometimes, it changes. It doesn't always look the same.
Yep. And it's not a one and done. And our self-care routines, in many ways, need to be responsive to what we're assessing about our own personal state. Sumara also helps the person to feel understood. Very true. Gloria adds, I've also noticed that when I'm not taking good care of myself, I don't have the patience or presence of thought to understand what the individual might need for regulation or the means to provide it. And you got a sunflower for that one. Sumara writes, pinpointing in de-escalation involves identifying the specific trigger or concern that drives the emotional escalation. Yes. And that may come later because we're still trying to sort of de-escalate the moment. The understanding may come later, the insight may come later, and we still want to de-escalate the moment. So I'm going to make a statement. Oh, I'm going to hand it over to Antonio before I make that statement. Go ahead, Antonio.
Well, for me, I'm listening, right? And first of all, grand rising to everyone. I'm listening, and what I'm learning is, first of all, de-escalation is a tool that's a foundational tool. I need that. I need that. That's just got to be one of my pillars that I stand on. Also, I have to have self-care. I have to be self-regulated, right? I have to have enough balance in my life to be able to look at what's going on or what might transpire. I've been in very big classes. Paul, you've been part of my process of understanding. I appreciate you as a facilitator. You've given me a lot of fresh insight on different various topics, but also one of the things that I learned about de-escalation is, how should I say this? How do I want to put this? Okay, so in the process of de-escalation, I am not trying to solve the problem at that moment. I'm not. What I'm trying to do is empathetically hold space or understand what's going on with that person. Through my own trial and error, I've learned that when I try to fix, manage, or control that situation from escalating, it goes further. So let me just let that person be heard, or let that person say what's on their mind, speak their voice, so to speak. And I heard someone else earlier say it's not just in my work field, but in my everyday life. And I think that's key. As I carry myself like that, I noticed that you give people enough room to be heard, then you speak when it's necessary. So what I've done is learn how to give people 80 and I take 20. And then when it's time for me to interject, I will. But most of the time when people are in an escalated mood, the last thing you want to use is your mouth.
Thank you. And if you are going to use your mouth, you want to use it in a very intentional way. Now, to Antonio's spot on, eloquent insight, let me underline, when someone is escalated, your job, your goal is not to fix or solve the problem at that point. Your goal is also not to educate the person at that point. Now, I know that may seem counterintuitive because you may think, well, if I just explain this, but then we have to go back to what Chelsea was telling us about the brain structure and where somebody is, because that person won't in that moment be able to take in your explanation. And to Antonio's insight as well, it may actually escalate the situation. And again, I really appreciate the clarity with which Antonio stated your job at that point is to help that person to feel as safe as they possibly can, to feel heard, which doesn't involve the use of my mouth necessarily, unless it's in a very intentional way, and that you are doing everything you can to understand where they are at that moment. And that can be a real shift for people about de-escalation, because we might intellectually think, well, let me just explain this more. Let me just fix the problem for them and then they'll calm down. Heard, understood, that you are present for them. The basis of effective de-escalation. Okay? Antonio even gives me a larger opportunity to make this statement. And I'm very curious if you have any reaction to this statement. And if you have a reaction, in any reaction, feel free to unmute and share it. But this is the statement that I'm going to make. Your ability to successfully de-escalate is directly related to your current state of well-being. Your ability, Chelsea wants to comment on that. Go ahead, Chelsea. Go right ahead.
The example I gave before was when I had a peer in a meeting who had a lot of, they were thinking of, you know, some drastic self-harm.
Yes.
And so that brought up feelings within myself because I had gone through that in the past myself, but I had worked so hard on it, and I haven't had those thoughts in many, many years.
Yeah.
So I'm at a space where it wasn't that hard for me to, you know, tell the person like I'm here for you, that you can get through this. And I shared some of the stuff, well, not like my self-harm, but I said like you can get through this. I know for myself. So
Yeah.
I definitely think that it's much harder to de-escalate a situation if you're in a if you're in a state of, you know, the sympathetic nervous system as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Chelsea. And you know, to your point, you were not, the example that you gave really indicates that you were not triggered by where this person was, even though you'd had a similar experience, because you, and I love the way you put it, you'd done so much work on it that you weren't triggered any longer. And you were able to hear them, be present for them, and communicate understanding. So far, Yvonne is the only other person who shared a reaction, and it was, I agree with the statement. So let's do it as a poll. If you agree with the statement that I made, type an A in the chat. If you disagree, type a D. And if you're unsure, type a U. And there are 45 of us. So I'm hopeful that I'll see everybody register what their reaction to that statement is. And I'll repeat it. Your ability to successfully de-escalate is directly connected to your current state of well-being. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so it looks, okay, unsure, yeah, unsure is fine. And disagree is fine. I'm just asking for your reaction. Everything, all reactions are welcome. And I'll just ask before we move forward, does anybody want to say anything more about their reaction to that statement? Terrence, the floor is yours.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. That goes to our mindset, right? Our mindset is everything, because if we're having a bad day, we're having an off day,
Yeah.
it goes back to, I know it's not part of this training, but yesterday, the little scenario that you gave us with James, it goes right back to that, you know, with him berating the one gentleman in the group. It's the same, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And Terrence is referring to in a training yesterday, learning community conversation yesterday, there was a scenario where a worker actually acted out on the, lashed out at the client using privileged information that the worker had about the client. And Terrence, that's an excellent connection in terms of, here was somebody who was not regulated. They were escalated, the worker was escalated in the moment, triggered in the moment, and then they acted out on the client, which further escalated the situation. Go ahead, Terrence. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, because I don't know who was in the group yesterday, but the guy in group says, I'll kick you out of this group like your wife kicked you out of the house. That was the situation.
Yeah. 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 And very well remembered, Terrence. Thank you. Yeah. Courtney writes, all caps, wow. Yeah, it was a real wow, Courtney. And unfortunately, I couldn't see people's faces when we read this scenario out, but I think it was a wow for people. McKenna adds, I agree with that statement. When speaking with a client, you can also sometimes have different memories come up from your own past that can affect how you handle the situation with the client. Beautifully, accurately, insightfully said, written. Absolutely. Yep. Couldn't agree with you. And Chelsea adds vicarious trauma too. which means you're in a state of depletion if you're experiencing vicarious trauma. So before I promise you, I'm going to show another slide, and I'm going to ask everybody to do one thing before we go back to the slides. And it's probably, and Vivian writes, this is why self-care is the best care. Thank you, Vivian. Please come to every learning community conversation that I have, and feel free to write that or anything else in the chat. That's fantastic. I'm going to repeat it. This is why self-care is the best care. Vivian Brown wrote that in the chat. Thank you, Vivian. What I'm going to ask everybody to do at this particular moment is I'm going to ask you to just take a nice deep breath and let it go. Let's do it one more time together. Nice deep breath. Let it go. And just check in with yourself at this particular moment. Just check in with yourself. How are you doing? How are you feeling right in this particular moment? That self-awareness, that intentional checking in is critical to effective de-escalation, because you just got some sort of sense of where you are. Before you walk into a situation, it's really important for you to know where you are. So Chelsea writes, exhaling longer than inhaling is criteria, okay? Yvonne adds, I think there are other circumstances that affect this, but even with training, our emotions can still affect how we deliver services. Yes, 100%, of course. That's a beautiful and very clear statement. Julie writes, thanks for the opportunity. I needed it. And Chelsea writes, critical. Anita, that's fine. Not a problem. Do not worry about that. And thanks for letting me know. All right, folks, as promised, I'm going to share my screen now and show you a slide. And that is simply that I'm asking you to consider a few things. One, and we've said this already, but trying to reason with somebody or educate them at a particular moment when they're experiencing a high affect, I will go so far as to put it in writing on this slide that in many ways that's impossible. And I'm thinking of Antonio as I say this, it can actually escalate the situation. Our goal, as Antonio so eloquently stated, is to help reduce that arousal or that affective state so that possibly conversation will then be possible. So our goal is to communicate, I'm here with you, I'm present, I see you, and I hear you. Chelsea, please go right ahead. The floor is yours.
Sorry to interrupt, but something came up that I was remembering, and something that I've always used for de-escalation is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game, which is named 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And by the third one, the 3 things that you can touch, I can always see the person's emotions go way down, and because they're activating the frontal lobe where they're thinking about, you know, they were thinking about something else, and all of a sudden they're thinking about something that's grounding them. And I just want to say that because like I know this brain stuff, but I don't talk about that in my meetings, but
Right.
I use this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game, and I've noticed that with the grounding, their affect is completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you, because you are describing a grounding activity. And again, I think the only thing that I would add to that, and thanks for sharing that, Chelsea, because keep in mind, folks, what Chelsea just described so clearly is a grounding activity that helps ground that person in the moment. It helps ground them in the present. And again, it's all about the timing of when you would do that. And again, you would start to, have a sense as you're working with this person where they are, because you're attending to what's going on with them. So yes, and Automad's Rainbow 54321 is also great, easy to do in places, of senses grounding. Makes perfect sense. Yvonne adds, understood. No problem, Yvonne. Thanks for letting me know. And also keep in mind, folks, when somebody is in an escalated stage, they're acting possibly on a normal human impulse of either fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. I would invite you to consider that in many ways, and this may seem particularly strange to people in the learning community who do this a lot, but I will throw out that de-escalation actually can feel unnatural. It is unnatural, and it requires practice so that it becomes second nature. Antonio, the floor is yours, please.
Well, also what you're referring to are one's own survival skills and the way that I approach it. I was once told if you back a dog into a corner, eventually it doesn't matter what kind or what size of the dog, they will bite. So as human beings, if we are feeling pressured, we get to a point of no return, and then we automatically respond in those different ways: fight or flight or fawn or freeze.
Absolutely, because that is how we have evolved, and that's how we're wired. Sheila, the floor is yours. Go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go right ahead. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Up a little bit, but I'm go ahead.
Okay, yeah, okay. A little muff. Okay. I think it's important for the individuals to realize that they do that have the ability to de-escalate through practice by allowing them to vent whatever's going on with them, and knowing that when they vent it, that the person, the clinician, is going to still be there regardless of how they vent it. So so the next time that they do it, they know that it's a process that they'll be safe in, and that most importantly that they'll feel better. Being able to be heightened and then being able to bring themselves down, or with coaching, or with just the air or silence, or whatever process is done, that they can feel better when they're escalated. So I think that's important for them to know as well.
Thank you
and as a clinician, it's also important for you to know that.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. As a clinician,
it's also important for you to know that you can de-escalate individuals on any level. So
yes, absolutely. And I want to underline what you were saying before in regard to the client, consumer, or participant who's escalated. If they are able to have the insight, if they are able to take in, this becomes a life skill for me. I know I need to get this off my chest. I know I need to get it out in an uninterrupted space, and then maybe I'll feel better. And your point about that we communicate to them that we are there for them before, during, and after they're needing to get it out. Absolutely. Vivian added in the chat, sometimes silence can be helpful in de-escalation. Absolutely. Vivian Brown also wrote that in the chat. And Vivian, I like those little sparkles that come after. I'm not sure how you're adding that little emoji sparkly thing, but it's very nice. It makes your statements very powerful. And again, I think Vivian is absolutely right. And some people are more comfortable with silence than others. And I think that's an important consideration. So, big thing I'd like you to take away from our 2 hours together is that de-escalation, folks, is a process. It's not an event. It's often looked at mostly as this thing happens, I go take care of it, then I go back to work. And what I'd really like you to consider is that de-escalation is a process. There's a beginning, There's a middle and there's an end. And the beginning begins long before any event ever occurs. And you'll know what I'm saying in more detail in just a moment. I want to acknowledge Courtney wrote in the chat, I am finding value in sharing of these experiences, to use Antonio's analogy of the dog being backed into a corner. I feel sometimes we as helpers feel backed into corners, but the open sharing is normalizing for me. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you for putting that in the chat. And I really also appreciate that you're acknowledging that there can be a parallel process between us and the client. And again, we want to be aware of that and attending to that. So this idea that there's a before, a during, and after in the process of de-escalation. We can plan to de-escalate long before any event ever occurs. We can also prepare, and we can also practice. Yeah, Chelsea, please go ahead.
Just quickly, I want to point out that when you're looking at a map, you don't always know where exactly you're gonna end up, but you can, during the journey, like I guess the point is to harm reduction.
Yes.
If that makes sense, like
makes complete sense.
Somehow, because we don't know if the end, they might end up in a hospital, and we might feel bad if they're in the hospital, but at the same time, it might be the better place for them at that point.
Yeah.
So to the point of the map, I was thinking that we don't always know the end, but we know that we can help them in some way.
Yeah, and you know, Chelsea, you've also underlined a really critical point, and I'm going to take the slide down to underline this point because I want to see yours and everybody else's face, which is Chelsea's really also identifying, folks, that sometimes we can be really successful at de-escalating a situation, and we may not like the outcome. We've done it very successfully, but it may not feel good. Because as you so clearly said, Chelsea, we might feel bad that, you know, the best outcome for this person was actually to be hospitalized. And we may feel bad about that. And yet we successfully de-escalated. We successfully helped that person to transition to the care that was appropriate for them in that particular moment. So I want to acknowledge two very important things to consider. One, de-escalation isn't always successful. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Two, you can successfully de-escalate and it doesn't always feel good. And that's why the after, Chelsea, thanks so much for acknowledging that. That's why the after becomes so critical, which leads me back to my slide for just a moment. And to your point, Chelsea, about the map, absolutely. When we are de-escalating, we don't always know what that outcome is actually going to be. And we may not like it. What I also would like to acknowledge, and that's why we did that little breathing exercise, is that we can prepare by checking in with ourselves, by checking in with our network, by making sure that we're not going in escalated and not grounded. We can ground ourselves. We want to prepare just before we walk in, and then we may de-escalate the situation. Now, what I'd like to throw out is after the de-escalation, and I bet there are a few people in this learning community, I hope it's not a lot. I bet there are a few people in this learning community that after you've de-escalated a situation, you went right back to your desk and continued your work. And I get it. There's probably pressures to do that. My hope is that never happens again, unless that's the best thing for you. What I would like to throw out is that after you de-escalate a situation, you do want to seek some sort of support. Again, and that may be different for everyone in this learning community. I've had people say in the learning community, after I de-escalate a situation, I need to spend a little time alone. And then I can debrief. So you know yourselves best. But what I'm suggesting is that every time you de-escalate, it has an impact on you. And the after part is that you seek some sort of support and you debrief, you reflect on what happened. So it can be a learning experience, which can lead us back to planning. Because hopefully every situation that happens helps add to your capacity to more effectively de-escalate. Chelsea, please, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I'll try to keep this very brief. So I was thinking in my situation with the group with the person who had a lot of self-harm thoughts. While I was in the meeting, I'm the only facilitator, but I was texting with my supervisor, like making sure I was doing everything right. And then after the meeting finished, I called my supervisor and we talked over the whole situation.
Great.
So I had to seek support during and after the situation.
Fantastic. So you were utilizing your team, your supervisor, and you debriefed afterward. Antonio, the floor is yours, please. Antonio, did you want to add something? Okay, if you do.
Yeah, sorry
just
about that. That was
Yeah,
I can't. It was
Go ahead.
hard. No,
Go ahead.
based on what you were saying, it made a lot of sense, right? But at the same time, de-escalation for me is a safety skill. It's a safety skill because I'm able to provide safety not just for myself, but for the client, for the agency, right? And then I'm able to check in, not at that moment. I can't check in with that person at that moment, but eventually when they're ready to calm down and let go. And I also have to watch my tone, the way I talk, make sure I'm giving them eye contact, make sure I'm attentive to what's going on with them. Because most of the time when people come at you like that, or they come in that fashion, a lot of it has to do with that's their only way to respond to things. That's a learned behavior. Either through their family or their environment. So we have to incorporate new ways to approach that. What makes it bad for us is if it doesn't work, it looks bad on us. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. And I think, you make a really good point. And I think the thing we have to understand and consider maybe, and hopefully anybody who's really thinking about de-escalation is thinking about this, that first of all, de-escalation it doesn't always work. Sometimes additional resources are needed. Sometimes it's appropriate to call the police. As much as that can be a really traumatic intervention, but sometimes things are out of our ability. And for the safety of everyone, you first, your colleagues second, the client third, the other clients fourth. For everyone's safety, sometimes the level of intervention needs a different approach, and what we're doing, what we bring to the table, is not able to resolve the situation. That's not always the case. Again, I like the fact that you're linking de-escalation to safety, because ultimately that's the point, to help the person to feel safe enough to then participate. I will throw out that I have shared with you in this slide deck these 4 slides, which I'm intentionally not going to go over, and I invite you to go over them after this learning community conversation, that basically outline a model that focuses on care, welfare, safety, and security of the client, participant, consumer, patient. I wanted to share this model with you, and I'm sharing it with you in this way because I want you to have a conversation after our time in the learning community together. And these 4 slides, which you will get and you'll have access to, can be a really wonderful way to continue the conversation with your team, with your colleagues, in your setting, in your organization, about the mind frame and the heart set that we want to enter into the process of de-escalation with. And it's beautifully laid out, simply laid out in this 4 sort of domain model, which again, we're not going to spend the time to review this model during our time together. I offer it to you as a post-learning community opportunity to further the conversation. And it's there for you to use as you see fit. We established this in the beginning. I do think it's important to underline it, is that the landscape that we are working in, people have substance use histories. They may have complex psychological and physical health concerns. They may have experience of historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, current trauma. They may have other compounded life stressors. And somebody mentioned this very early on, I think in the chat, that they may have past experiences with our organization or other organizations that predispose them to come in a defensive kind of heightened state. And then there's also the moment before. We don't know what has happened to this person or what they witnessed or experienced just before they walked in. So if they come in and they have heightened feelings, if they're escalated, that's pretty normal. And it's important, I think, to acknowledge that, because then we can be prepared. We can check in with ourselves. How are we doing? We can make sure that we are doing what we need to do to be able to do what we need to do, to use some of these skills and some of these methods of communication. Sometimes in settings too, there can be the expectation clients, patients, consumers could come in and they could expect that, like, this is going to be solved immediately, or you're going to provide me with this service immediately. Also, there may be frustration tolerance where something doesn't happen in the speed or the way that they wanted it to happen, and it creates a certain frustration, fear, anger, whatever. And then proximity sparks. Having clients interact with each other and possibly their interactions with other staff, including yourself, can cause people to move into an escalated state. Now, this is a very simple scenario, which we are going to skip because I have a more complex scenario that I'd like us to look at in regard to this Meet Jody scenario. I have another one that I'd really like us to take the time to look at, and you can use this one if you want to have further conversations or opportunities to brainstorm and practice after. So I'm going to take the slide down in just a moment, but I am going to ask for 2 volunteers. Nobody's voluntold. You can volunteer. I'm going to invite 2 volunteers, and then we will need a third, but we won't get to that until later. But I'm asking for 2 volunteers at this point to read a pre-written scenario between a worker named Barbara and a client named Philip. So I'm going to ask if there are 2 people who'd be willing to read this part of the scenario out loud. Okay, I think Terrence is maybe volunteering or asking a question. Am I correct, Terrence? Is it one or both? Or
I was volunteering.
Fantastic. So Terrence is going to volunteer, and then we'll see if somebody else is willing to volunteer. And I'm going to stop sharing this and bring up the scenario. And Terrence, since you volunteered first, which character would you like to read? Would you like to be Barbara the worker, or would you like to be Philip the client?
Oh, it doesn't matter to me. I can be either or.
Well, I'll let you choose. You volunteered first.
I'll be Philip.
Fantastic. Okay, so Terrence is going to play Philip. Is there anybody who'd be willing to play Barbara, the worker? And again, your only requirement to do this is to be able to read this out loud in a voice loud enough that everybody in the learning community can hear you. Is there someone who'd be willing to unmute and read the staff person Barbara. Ermelinda, are you volunteering?
I am. I'm
Yes,
I'm off camera because the coverage isn't great. It
No
keeps kind of
problem.
like
Yep.
dropping, but
We
yeah,
we
I'll be
can
good.
hear you loud and clear. That's fantastic.
Good, good.
Now, what I will ask Terrence and Ermelinda before we applaud them and thank them for their volunteering, they got everybody else off the hook. Before we do that, we applaud them. I'm going to just remind them, Terrence, Ermelinda, please just stick to the script. As caught up in the moment as you may be, please do not ad lib. Just stick with what's. Oh, Terrence, you're laughing, but you should see some of the things that have come out when I have not said that.
I had
So
it all planned out too.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. I had to de-escalate you. So please, please stick to the script, and then we will pause and look at it. And remember, I am going to need a third volunteer for another staff person named Sue. So I'll leave that to be mysterious. So I'm going to bring the script up, and Terrence, Ermelinda, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it's going to be big enough for both of you to see. Ermelinda will be the role of Barbara, and Terrence will be the role of Philip. And before, let's applaud them and thank them for their willingness to do this. Excellent. And you can do it electronically any way that works for you. But they've volunteered, and that's greatly appreciated. Terrence, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Okay. I'm here to see John for my appointment.
What's your name?
My name is Philip Thomas, Philip with one L. Y'all always spell it wrong.
Hi, Philip. I see that your appointment is not until next week.
That's not right. I have an appointment with John today. Check the spelling of my name in your computer. My appointment is today.
No, Philip. I see here it's for next week. You're going to have to come back next week for your appointment with John.
I ain't coming back next week. You think I got time to keep coming back here? My appointment is today. Check how you spelled my name again.
Sir, no matter how your name is spelled, John is not even here today to see you. I'm sorry, you'll have to come back next week for your appointment.
Bitch, this is some bullshit. Y'all got to do something for me right now. I got an appointment and now you're telling me John ain't even here? Well, you better call him because I ain't going to be right here. I'm going to be right here until John sees me today.
And pause. Curtain, as they say in the theater. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So I also usually give a warning that there's a curse in this.
Sorry.
No. Hey, Terrence, it's written that way. It's not on you.
It's not on you, Terrence. You didn't call me that.
So let me just ask, do you feel, and you can do this by nod or you agree or not disagree, but do you feel that this was a fairly realistic conversation between a worker and a client?
Yes.
Would you agree? Yeah, Jane, you agree? Okay, all right, okay. So people are typing why they agree in the chat. Okay, so that's good. So this realistically could happen. My next question is, any thoughts or any reactions to their interaction? Do you have any thoughts or any reaction to their interaction?
I do. I feel bad for calling her a bitch.
Okay, all right. And you know something? It's interesting that you say that, Terrence. Thank you. Because the client may feel that way too after the fact. We don't know, but that's where the client was in the moment, and that's what they said. Antonio, please, the floor is yours.
They might bring me to the stake for this one, but I don't believe that the person or the receptionist or the customer service agent or whoever that was, the administration person, I don't believe they approached that situation correctly.
Okay. Okay, Antonio, if it's okay, can I ask you a quick follow-up question?
Go ahead.
So if there was one thing you were going to point out about Barbara, who is at the front desk, beautifully portrayed by Ermelinda, although I have to say I think Ermelinda was a little too nice, but anyway, B agrees. I thought so too, B. I thought Ermelinda's just too nice for this role, but she did it anyway. She did it justice. If there's one thing you would point out, Antonio, that Barbara, the character, did that you think she didn't handle it so well, what's one thing you would point out?
It was a lot, man. But to me, I feel when we're dealing with that community of people, they're already on pins and needles, right? So we don't need to hit them across the head. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they do know. Maybe they know what they're doing. But at the same time, I just feel like the receptionist or the administration worker, they just didn't approach that correctly. By going back and forth with that person, if that's what they believe, let them believe that. I don't believe that when you get into a debatable conversation, that it's gonna de-escalate. I think it's going to escalate. It's going to fuel the person that's on the other side of the spectrum to want to pull a gun out. To me, that approach that Terrence came with, he already had his gun out when he approached the lobby.
Yeah.
So he was already ready to shoot the place up. So I'm not saying she was wrong, and the way the person that played that role, she probably doesn't have it. But if it was someone else, those words could have been miscrewed in the wrong direction if not said the right way.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Antonio. And I really appreciate your insight and acknowledgement that Terrence at start was already in this intense kind of escalated space. So Ermelinda, don't lose your thought. I just want to acknowledge that Chelsea wrote in the chat, she could have said, I'm sorry, but he's not here. Is there anyone else you might want to speak to today? Okay. And that would have been apologizing, and it would have been sort of acknowledging that maybe we can find another option. Okay. And, oh, understood, Claudette. Okay, so we're going to go to Ermelinda and then to B. Go ahead, Ermelinda. What did you want to comment on?
I felt that it's like she wasn't active listening from the beginning. But there wasn't a hello. There wasn't a how are you today? You know, how are you feeling? Because sometimes people, even if they're coming in fully charged, you can just go, hi, how are you? You know, like let them know I'm here, I'm listening to you.
Yep.
How can I help you?
Yep.
How can I reach out? And that greeting wasn't even there. It was a non-existent greeting. It was like, yeah, whoever you are just walked in.
Okay.
And I think not feeling acknowledged, the client not feeling acknowledged is hard because they're making that trip. You don't know, however it is. And you're having a hard day too. I mean, whoever knows, you don't know Barbara's situation, you know, so she could have gotten heartbreak that morning. But, you know, and, you know, that's whatever it is. But I think the fact that there wasn't even acknowledgement of like, she's looking at her screen when she even greets him. So, and there's not that look up, make that eye contact, say, hi, how are you today? What can I do for you today? How can I help you? How can I serve you? That approach was missing completely.
Understood. Thank you so much. And B, I'm just going to read what Von Treese wrote in the chat, and then the floor is yours. Von Treese wrote, when a person is displaying high levels of emotion, they hear things differently in the moment. Yes. And it's so, Von Treese, thank you for putting that in the chat, because what they're hearing more is your tone of voice as opposed to the words. So thank you, Von Treese. B, the floor is yours, and then we're going to go to Dawn. Go ahead.
Well, Ermelinda actually said it. I thought it was very interesting that the direction in the script was that she doesn't look up, and she had opportunities to de-escalate. He obviously, the person coming in is already coming in a certain state, and you could hear that or see that. You know, she just, one of the things that she could have done is acknowledged him and looked up at him and made some eye contact. It's a lack of respect, you know, to not look at someone when they're speaking to you.
Yes, 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 yes. And let me see if you have a reaction to this, B. And had she been looking up, she might have seen in advance that he was agitated. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, and then she could have responded appropriately had she noticed that. Yeah, thank you. Dawn, please, the floor is yours. And I really appreciate that you linked that B to respect, just like basic human respect. Go ahead, Dawn.
So I'm not sure if it was mentioned before about how the client reacts to previous interactions through the agency. That also goes for staff.
Yeah.
Staff also reacts to the agency, whatever's going on in the agency. Staff also reacts to constantly seeing this behavior
Yes.
from clients.
Yeah.
And sometimes the staff members may not do anything to ignite it even more.
Yes. Yep.
Right? Because
Yep.
I think as we're talking about de-escalating, it's important for me to look at things holistically, not just looking at the staff member or just looking at the client, but looking at what's going on in general that's affecting everyone. And yes, it is important to look at people, but some people may say, and let me use the language, what the fuck are you looking at? That
Yes.
can also come out. So I just wanted to mention that because as we go through any scenario, one scenario could look a whole bunch of different ways from different perspectives. So that's what I
Sure.
wanted to share.
Thank you, Dawn. And I really appreciate the fact that you're contextual. Von Treese is applauding you in that, by the way, Dawn. So absolutely. And I think what you're really describing is why the after is so important. Because what you're describing, Dawn, and I think you described it really accurately, is like scenarios exist within a context. And if the context is that the staff is repeatedly subjected to these kind of interactions, and there's no way for them to let go of the effect on that, acknowledge the effect that that may have on them, that there's a chance that the staff is going to turn into defending themselves. And that defense could take the shape of, well, if I just don't make eye contact with this person, maybe they won't explode. So you're acknowledging that there can be deeper complexity to this is extremely appreciated and very relevant. And again, that shouldn't keep us in any way from still focusing on what maybe we can do differently in order to have some sort of impact. Von Treese, please, the floor is yours, and then we're going to go to Dawn H. Go ahead.
I just want to add that, like, a lot of people don't realize that not everyone, but majority of people are walking around with just stressors. And sometimes they're looking for a reason to explode. So just by saying a good morning, how you doing, how are you feeling today, or just smiling at a person can make, that could change their whole mood in that moment. And sometimes it's like even when I'm like sitting on a train, I remember a woman, like I felt her energy. She sat next to me and she started staring at me. So in my head, I'm like, okay, she's probably looking for me. If I look at her, we're going to start probably going back and forth, So now when I like just engage with people in the world, I keep that in mind because we don't know who's going through what. And even as a worker, yes, we are hired to provide services and to help, but you also have to look at situations in that way too. So, because even when me and my partner go to like different facilities, the staff are nasty. So we're like, if you could be nasty to me, imagine how you are to the clients.
Yeah. Yep. And absolutely. And that is like emblematic of that there's no after their de-escalation, that they're not getting the support that they need in order to be, and really point well taken. If they're nasty to you as a coworker, there's clearly a lot going on there. Yeah. Dawn, the floor is yours.
This actually plays into what my job is every day. I manage a front desk lobby receptionist area, and when I just hired 2 people, and part of my training is As soon as you hear those doors open, I want you looking, smile, you know, we need to make this a great first impression, welcoming. Um, and we actually had someone yesterday. Well, we have someone every day, but he walked in and he's like, I have an appointment at 2:30. And we called the employee and she's like, his appointment was at 2. He's late. I'm not going to see him. And we were like, well, can you at least come down and talk to him? And she was like, no, we're not doing that. You know, I don't have time. He's 30 minutes late. And I thought, you know, let's just let's just work with him. Well, he had her business card and it said 2:30. And it was in her handwriting. So we called her back and she's like, that's not possible. And I said, look, I don't know what's going on, but he is here for his appointment and you need to come down and talk to him because he's your client. It's your schedule. And she actually did come down and she's like, oh, you know, once she saw the business card in her handwriting and it said 2:30, it was like a whole different attitude. And I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, are you going to come over and apologize? Which was really irrelevant, but at the same time, our front desk receptionists do a lot more than what people think because they only see them on the phone or checking somebody in. They don't see the, excuse me, 15 minutes prior to that person, you know, talking on their phone while they're trying to check in, and the phone call they're on is more important than giving us the information. So it can be a very thankless job, um, which is why I make it a point to take this information that I learned through these webinars to my staff and say, hey, here's an idea. I'm always pouring into them because it is very important to, one, welcome the person with a smile because you don't know what kind of day they're having. You know, it's just, one of my employees said to me yesterday after that situation, they're like, you know, if everybody had your attitude and treated people the way you treat them, no matter what the situation is, the world would be a great place. And that like tugged at my heart because I'm just acting, I'm not even acting. What you see is what you get. Um, And, you know, kindness is free, whether we're receiving it or giving it out. Let's do it. So this whole situation is just like, you know, that's literally my day every day in some aspect. So just my 2 cents worth.
Yeah. Thank you. And it was far more than 2 cents worth, Dawn. Thank you so much. And I want to acknowledge you're really underlining a point that is, I hope, another takeaway in regard to our time together, is that de-escalation is a team event. It's not a one person.
No.
It's a team event. And everyone, no matter their role, who comes in contact with that person is an important member of the team.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Dawn, thanks so much. Antonio, I'm going to give you the floor. Go right ahead.
Also, without self-care, I love what Don said. Kudos to that. She gets an emoji from me, right? But the second thought that comes to mind is that if I don't self-care within myself, I lack the ability to pay attention when those situations transpire. I cannot conduct myself in an orderly fashion because I am not self-regulated.
That's right.
So now I'm putting myself, I'm walking into the lion's den with pork chop drawers on. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. I'm setting myself up for
yes,
failure.
I do get it. Get it. Yes. Yeah. You're setting yourself up to be eaten.
Yes, because the person is already at 100 and I'm at 0.
Right.
And now I go in, you know, I was once told that anger is like mail. You could always return it to the sender, right?
Yes.
It's up to you to take it. It's a spirit, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes the best thing to do, because I do drug court and I do SUD counseling. I deal with people on a daily basis that feel like the world is against them. So yes, they feel like everybody's out to try to tell them what to do.
Yep.
So what I do is I give them the opportunity to be their self. Be yourself, man. What is it? And then a lot of times what I've caught through my trial and error, Paul, is that when I stop trying to control, fix, and manage, people come to me and they apologize. And I don't even know why they apologize. And they say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to act like that with you the other day. I'm like, what happened? I know what happened, but I don't want to feed into it anymore. I've let that go. I've moved on. Right?
Yep.
So, and I say, it's okay. It's okay. You say, I just want to apologize, man. I wasn't right. I shouldn't have said those things to you. You know, or I've had people walk out of my class and then come back the next day and apologize. Or I've had people tell me I don't want him to be my counselor. And then my supervisor will say, well, I'm confused because now he's telling me he wants you as a counselor. I'm like, because I'm learning that it's in a moment. That's how quick things can change. It's in a moment. My job as a clinician is to not feed into it, you know, and that's where the
and
self
to not escalate.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna drop the.
Okay, excellent. And again, you know, just keeping in mind that we, to some degree, can have control over that for ourselves. We can't control what the other person does. And think about it, folks. And I'm thinking of Chelsea as I say this. Think about it. When a person comes back and apologizes, it means that they've gotten to a different place in their brain. They were able to reflect on what happened. And then they're having the courage to come back and take responsibility for what they did. So that's a powerful growth opportunity for them as well. Ermelinda wrote, compassion and kindness is key to better your life. Absolutely. Von Treese adds, and not taking it personally. Yeah, and I would imagine, Von Treese, for you and maybe for all of us, and again, I'm just asking a question here, there may be days where it's easier to take it not personally than other days. And again, that all comes back to where I may be at any given moment. Yeah, and Vivian Brown writes in the chat, we can't pour from an empty cup. Exactly. Thank you, Vivian. I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to go back to the slides for just a moment because we're, believe it or not, folks, and you may believe it very well, we are nearing the end of our time together, our 2 hours together. Just a couple of other things that I'd like to just touch on, and if there's time permitting, we will go back to the scenario, and this is where I need a third volunteer, and this volunteer has to consider whether they want to be a hero or not. So there is an opportunity to be a hero and de-escalate the situation. So I will let you ponder whether you want to volunteer. The character's name is Sue. So if you want to play Sue, we can go back, and we still, of course, need our Philip, which Terrence will play. Barbara Ermelinda, portrayed by Ermelinda, does not say anything else in the scenario. She chooses to use silence at this point, so which maybe is a good choice for her. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will touch on a couple of other things, and then, time permitting, we will get back to Sue, who I like to refer to as the hero. And actually, what I will add is Sue is not so much a hero. She is skilled in what she's doing. So a couple of things I think to keep in mind about effective intervention. You all have named most of these already, but it can be helpful to have them in kind of a 7-element list here. And Antonio has said this a number of times. A number of other people have said it. The idea that we can learn in the face of somebody's heightened affect that we can actually be regulated, and that we can be modeling that self-regulation to the person. And we're doing it for ourselves. We're doing it to be effective. And another side benefit is that it's also modeling. If it's safe and if it's appropriate, we can isolate that individual. If it's not safe to do that, we don't do that. But if it's safe, sometimes it can be better if if we're de-escalating, if it's appropriate and safe to have that person in a safe place where they're not being influenced by an audience. We also, because of where this person may be in their heightened affect, where they may be in their brain, we want to be very careful about our body language and very attuned to, is eye contact making this person uncomfortable? Am I observing any discomfort? Or is my physical proximity, am I too close to this person? Do my gestures seem to be? So we want to attend to their reaction to our body language. And also, if we are going to talk, if we are going to use our mouth, to borrow one of our colleagues' statements, we want to keep whatever we say as very simple and hopefully connected to reflective listening, communicating that we're really trying to understand their perspective. One of our colleagues noted earlier that sometimes silence is so powerful because the person needs to process uninterrupted what's going on. And then tone of voice has been mentioned, the speed at which we speak. The paraverbals also have an impact on the person that we are intentionally trying to help to de-escalate by letting them know we hear them, we're present with them, and we're trying to understand their situation. This is a brief model that I just want to lay out for you as a tool. You can observe any moment of a person in a particular situation or an interaction by assessing their affective state. What feelings are they exhibiting in that moment? Their behavioral functioning, what is their physical interaction like? And their cognitive state. Are they making sense? Is what they're saying related to what's going on in the moment? Does their thinking or their speech seem clear? And I throw this out to you to consider, and you could apply this model to the scenario to consider that this is a very basic and quick way to get a quick snapshot of where somebody is in any given moment. And it can be helpful because it can inform how you proceed. So I just wanted to share this with you as a model. We've already talked about this scenario of Philip at the front desk, and we're not going to, unfortunately, have the time to apply the model and Vivian also adds, cultural awareness is also important in establishing effective boundaries. Absolutely, Vivian. All of this, to our colleague's earlier point, has to be looked at within the context of the culture, the setting, and the moment. So these are some questions that you could there are questions that you could ask about using the scenario with Philip in the front desk, and hopefully we're going to be able to get back to that. You could use the ABC model to sort of assess both Barbara and Philip. Again, a way to take a quick snapshot. I invite you to consider trying, twice to apply that model to somebody you're observing in the moment. What is their affect like? What is their behavior like? What is their cognition like? We can also, when a person has de-escalated, and again, this is when they've calmed down, when they've returned to being able to participate in a conversation, it may be necessary to set limits with that person. And these 5 steps can be helpful in that limit setting process. And I will invite you to particularly focus on number 4, which is allow time. And the reason for that is because we want to let this person, if it's possible, we want to let them exercise their autonomy. And they may need a little bit of time and silence to consider the choices or consequences. So when setting limits, try to let people really move through a process of consideration, which may require a little more time. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Self-care and team care. First and foremost, we want safety for everybody. And let me repeat in order. You, your colleagues, the client, and the other clients. The whole point of de-escalation is for safety for everyone. And your well-being, of course, has an impact on your team and your ability to de-escalate. De-escalation is a team process. Effective and safe de-escalation, it starts long before there's ever an incident. There's a before, there's a middle, and there's an after. Again, the process of de-escalation, we always have the opportunity to reflect on what we've done, what has occurred, figure out what we need to recharge, and then we can refine what we're doing and we can grow our capacities as individuals and as a team to actually de-escalate. And most important, to remember that no one de-escalates alone. My hope is that that's a really primary takeaway. A couple of self-care reminders before we get back to the scenario is know yourself. We're all unique individuals. Stress impacts our bodies and our reactions in very unique ways. Be aware of when you're stressed out. Debrief with the team or others, or do whatever you need to do after debriefing a situation in order to not be negatively impacted by what you did. If you need to, and if you can, take time away, and maybe you can't do it immediately, but if you can in the future, again, acknowledge and respond to your particular needs. If you have a supervisor that you trust, that you value their support and their opinion, supervision is a perfect place to focus on this and to discuss it. And you may have employee assistance programs or other employer-sponsored benefits like paid sick time, vacation time, all of those things. They could be at your fingertips to use. And the question really is are you using them when you need them? And somebody mentioned this earlier, and I'm glad that I'm remembering it because I want to go back to it. Somebody in the learning community suggested that sometimes it's hard for caregivers to focus care on themselves. It's something about the wiring or something that feels selfish. And I know that's a generalization. There may be people in our learning community who are excellent at their own self-care and well-being. I know for myself, I'll make an I statement here. Sometimes I have actually lost vacation time, paid vacation time, because I didn't use it. So just keeping that in mind that, the resources are there. I'm the only person who can actually, use them or not. Now, before we conclude, I'm going to ask, is there anyone who has decided that they would be willing to be Sue in our scenario? Is there someone who'd be willing to unmute and read the character of Sue? Literally, it's just a few lines. And Sue is a hero, I think. But you'll decide for yourselves whether you think she's a hero or not. So is anyone willing to unmute and read Sue along with Terrence, who is going to be Philip? And we know where Philip left. I ain't going anywhere until so we know where he kind of concluded. Is someone willing to unmute and read Sue?
I'll do it.
Claudette says she'll do it. And you know something, Claudette? Before you unmuted and volunteered, I saw you say it. Claudette, thank you so much.
No
And
worries.
Claudette and Terrence. Yes. Thank you. So we're going to go to this part of the scenario. Claudette, you're Sue. Terrence, you're still Philip. And it's a continuation of what just happened. Philip just cursed at Barbara and said what he said. And then, and here comes, I'll bring it up. Whenever you're ready, Terrence.
Well, you better call him because I'm going to be right here until John sees me today.
EHILIP Philip with one L. Mr. Philip Thomas?
That's right, 1L. You got it. And who the hell are you?
Mr. Thomas, I'm Sue. You're here and you're ready to see John.
You got that right, and I'm not going anywhere until I see someone.
You're going to see someone today. I'm really sorry for our scheduling mistake. If you tell me to, I can check to see if one of the other counselors is available.
I'm here. Sure, go ahead and check. Before they see me, would you tell them it's Philip with 1L?
Yes, Mr. Thomas. Philip with one L. They'll know before they see you.
End of scene. Excellent. Excellent. I like that. I like those pregnant pauses. Excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
I tried.
So, did anything stand out to you about that part of the scenario? Is there anything that you noticed, anything that stood out to you in that part of the scenario? Chelsea, please, you could start us off.
It was actually exactly what I said I would say. Like, I'm sorry, but is there somebody else that you wanted to see? Like, that's just how I would have, like, calmly made sure that they were taken care of. And
Fantastic.
understand there might have been a mistake or something. Like, I'm sorry, but, and then offer another situation.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm glad that it sort of played out exactly the way you thought it would. Anything else that anybody noticed? And I see that somebody put something in the chat. Let me just quickly check it. Courtney adds decency and respect. Courtney, do you want to say anything about that, or would you want to just let that stand on its own? Oh, and I'm not sure if your name is Courtney, but it says Courtney Mullins.
It is. That is me. I was going to let that stand on its own, but going back to the scenario, it's still resonating in my mind that Dawn shared her real life work situation. Now, God forbid that situation had escalated. The consequence would have been suffered by the member, but in reality, it was all triggered by the staff. And that just really, I'm still struggling with that.
Yeah. Yeah, Courtney, that the staff actually was the escalator.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then real life consequences for that individual, potentially.
Yes, meaning that either they don't get care or they drop out of care or some other negative outcome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you. And thanks for elaborating, even though decency and respect kind of stand on their own. So thanks for elaborating. Yvonne wrote in the chat, calm, respect, manner. And I think Ermelinda wanted to say something, and then Terrence. Am I correct, Ermelinda? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I like the fact that she focused on something that was a high priority to him, which is spelling of his name. She recognized that need, that he needed that fulfilled. That was key.
Yep. And Ermelinda, thank you for saying that, because the point I really want you to draw away from that, folks, is whether it makes sense to us or not, it was important to Philip. And Sue was able to attend and acknowledge what was most important to him. Even if Sue thought, I don't get it, why he's so, freaked out about the spelling of his name, but she didn't judge it. She just acknowledged it and then followed through on the Chelsea plan of making, acknowledging that there was a mistake, and then at seeing if he was open to another option. Go ahead, Terrence. Anything you want to add?
Yeah. In that moment, what I saw is she humanized me and gave me my identity that and there was no judgment there.
Yeah.
By repeating the spelling back, she saw that it was important to me, or to Philip, so she did that for him, and she calmed that situation down immediately. He was able to take a breath. He was able to feel safe in that space. She made a whole safe space for him.
Yeah. In 4 sentences.
Yep.
In 4 sentences. And again, I know it's a scenario. And I know it's a scenario because I wrote it. And again, real life, it may be different, but the point I want you to take away from that is you are able to, and Courtney, I'm thinking of you as I say this because I'm going to read what you wrote again. It is a choice to interact with somebody in a decent and respectful way. And Barbara may be a really nice person. Who knows? But for whatever reason, she did not treat Philip with the decency and the respect that he deserves as a fellow human being and as a participant in this, hopefully, wellness services or care. Chelsea adds, Philip had and we'll come right to you, Don. Philip had a bad feeling already because they always spell his name wrong previously. Bingo, absolutely, because he referred to that. This has happened before. And Vivian Brown writes, Philip said, put some respect on my name. Yes. Yeah, that's what he was asking for. Just respect my name. And Terrence, I love the fact that you brought it out to my identity. That might be really important to somebody. Dawn, the floor is yours.
In reference to the name, when people come in, because people spell names so differently nowadays, we do have clients that say, they'll tell us their name and they're like, you probably don't have it spelled right. And my staff were like, well, how do you want it spelled? It's your identity. It's who you are. And a lot of them are like, no, don't worry about it. My staff was like, no, this name is your identity. We just reiterate that and we get it fixed. But some of our clients, even the simplest name of like Katie, we'll joke with them and be like, okay, how are you spelling it today? And they laugh because, it's a way we break, the stress of what they're coming in for, building that relationship. Yeah. So, but yeah, names are kind of critical.
Yeah. When Shakespeare wrote, what's in a name? A lot.
Yep. Yes.
A lot.
More than you think.
And what you're doing, Dawn, what you just described, is really honoring and respecting somebody in a very decent and humane way. Folks, thank you so much for this 2 hours. Greatly, greatly appreciated. I'm going to show you the last slide. It has a QR code on it that you can scan that will take you right to the evaluation. It also has we're going to put a link. It's just my colleague, Clyde Frederick, just put it in the chat, a link for our evaluation as well. And once you've completed that, please feel free to log off and go on to your next appointment. Be well, and hopefully we'll see each other in the future. Terrence, I know I'm going to see you again. I'm positive of that. But hopefully we'll see each other in a future learning community conversation. And thank you for everything you brought to the table for this conversation.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to see you next week.
Fantastic. Okay. I'll look forward to it, Terrence. So I'm showing you the last slide with the QR code. And again, many thanks to the folks who were willing to read the scenarios. Greatly, greatly appreciated. One final thought. Remember, people may not remember what you said or what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel.